Today, I have a truly special guest. It's surreal in a way to be doing this interview. He and I met on an elevator ride at Pro Tour Atlanta all the way back in 1996. I was there to compete. He was there to be a celebrity. And he is quite the celebrity. He is unequivocally in the absolute pantheon of game designers globally. And he is the architect, the chief creative force behind the best game ever made in the history of humanity, in my humble opinion. It is such a pleasure and an honor to welcome to the channel today, my friend, Richard Garfield. So good to see you. How are you?
Hey, Brian. It's great to be here.
We hung out a couple of weeks ago. We actually did some playtesting. It's one of the things that's amazing to me is that I think a lot of people who would have a generational, a lifetime success, a game that will be forever associated with your name and your legacy. And yet you've never rested on your laurels at all. When I moved up into Seattle in 2007, and started hanging out and started receiving invites to go and play test at your house, you were always tinkering and always working on a project or two or three or four or five. You always had games on the back burner. Has that always been your process? Have you always been a game designer since you were very small? When did you start even?
I would say, I think Dungeons and Dragons made me a game designer. And that was, 78, 79, somewhere in there. And well, actually, I guess it would have been earlier than that. It was when I was about 13. And Dungeons and Dragons just blew my mind because everything I thought I knew about games, it seemed to break the rules on. And when you think about it, role-playing is really marvelous in that way. It really forces you as a person running a game to be a game designer, but it also forces the players to be game designers in a way too. They have to really take control of their play experience. So after discovering Dungeons and Dragons, I asked myself what other games were out there that I didn't know about. And I threw myself into any games I could get my hands on, which included going to the library, going to stores, studying old books. And every game I met, I tried to learn what made it fun if I didn't see that immediately. And so that became sort of a lifelong passion at that point.
I can really relate to many parts of that story. Honestly, you and I I think we're both officially Gen X. I'm 51.
I am very tail end of a boomer. So
you actually are on the tail end of boomer. Yeah,
you are allowed to call me boomer.
It's a state of mind anyway, and you were anything but, honestly, in all the important ways. But the idea that, like you, I was attracted to Dungeons and Dragons as well. Played it with friends, although I didn't enjoy playing it as much as I enjoyed being the dungeon master. I found that's what I actually really got excited about.
That's absolutely. That is, I actually began to wonder a few years ago whether that was some character weakness in me that I enjoyed running the game so much more than playing it. Whether I was had hidden control freak tendencies that I didn't see in other places. But
no, I would not. I would not assess it. Knowing what I know about you, I would not assess that. I think it's much more of the fact that the dungeon master is the most creative person in that process by far. I mean, you're literally creating the world and through description. The best dungeon masters are doing a lot more than reading off of a piece of paper on a module or something. They're doing all these sort of embellishments with sounds and visual things and stuff, all these cues to make it feel real to the players. And I think you have that quality for sure.
Certainly, that is the sort of thing that really excited me. I'm actually, I have not done any regular role playing for a while, but I'm beginning to do it with my 8-year-old, soon to be 9-year-old twins, and so that's a lot of fun.
It was really interesting hearing you talk about the friction involved in trying to learn about games and game design and game availability. It's something I think that it's such a generational component of what it was like to experience games in the 1960s and 70s and 80s and stuff, when all information was basically siloed. And even the information that you found, there was no way to vet it at all for accuracy, particularly when it came to games. I'm sure you had the experience of you played games, and particularly when it came to digital games, once those began to appear, where all these sort of rumors circulated about things that existed in the game, and no one could really verify whether or not that was true.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any experiences like that?
Oh, many, and it's hard. I think it's hard. It's hard for us who went through it to put ourselves back in that mind frame. It must be, I don't know, impossible for somebody who grew up with Google and being networked into groups who knew everything about whatever game they were interested in. But yeah, back in the day, that was part is wonderful to get access to so much information, which you have these days. But at the same time, that was part of the treasure hunt in the old days. You can still find treasures today, of course, but it was a different experience finding a game in those days, because you couldn't just finding a game these days is, oh, I've never seen this game. You sort of plug it into Google and look on BGG and see what the fans say and so forth.
Right.
But back in the old days, it was radio silence, right? It was like you found this thing, you couldn't research its provenance at all, and when you played it, you if you had a rules problem, you just had to figure it out yourself. Is a very different experience. My eyes were really open the first time I went to Essen, the big board game convention.
I've heard of it. Yeah, I haven't been.
Germany in October. It was so amazing to go to this large hall just dedicated to games with all these old games that I hadn't heard of. Most of them were not even in English at that point. They were in German and French, for example. But the English market was so small that we had to translate them ourselves.
What year was that? Do you remember?
My first Essen was, I'm guessing, 95. Might have been 96.
95. So actually post Magic release. So you would have
yeah.
You would have gone there as a rock star. So definitely kind of a different kind of experience, I imagine, versus if you had gone 10, 15 years prior.
It would have been just as or mind-blowing. At the time I went, I was a game design professional. And just 5 years earlier, I was not. I would have considered games a hobby that I took seriously, but just a hobby.
You mentioned the idea of finding mystery in the exploration and treasure hunting and so on in the gaming space. And I'm wondering, as a dad with two children who I'm sure are very internet savvy and have the ability to find whatever they want, do you work and try to find a way to cultivate that experience for them, to figure out a way to give them that kind of experience, which is, honestly so hard to come by, given how accessible all the information is?
That hasn't become much of an issue yet. They don't get much screen time, and so they are not old enough in our mind to sort of access those information databases yet. So they have this sort of treasure hunt capability just with the games that I have around. And kids those days is like sending yourself back, like everything is exploration then, everything is surprising, everything is new. It's a marvelous age.
I can't even imagine, honestly. It's so alien compared to the gaming ecosystem that we grew up in. Your house is awash in games. How on earth do they decide what to play?
I direct them, but then oftentimes they will get a bee in their bonnet about playing something that has a cat person on the front, and it's like, ooh, that looks cool. So I'll have to tell them, no, that's really not cool. But we'll struggle through it, and then they'll find another one which has a picture of a scary zombie, and oh yeah, that one works pretty well. So we direct each other. They're at a level where they are going mostly on the graphic images, and then is the gameplay.
Probably the best way to approach it, right? Because you never really know what you're going to get inside the box. Like you said, a cat game could be very inappropriate.
Yeah.
You mentioned screen time, actually, and this sort of segues to another thing I wanted to talk with you about, which is the inevitable transition from physical TCGs and physical gaming in general into the digital space. Something that, I've talked to many people in my past about how I've been able to kind of preside over the entire evolution of that medium. That I started playing games in the late 1970s that were digital. and have followed them incrementally all the way up to the present. And I'm curious to know, did you have the same attraction to digital games as well? Or did you always, did the games need to be physical for you for at least in your formative years?
No, I was always very interested in digital games, early arcades, early computer games. I programmed my own games. They were often outside of my budget, and so I did not play all that many and did not have access to all that many. I didn't even have like an Atari home system, right? That was something that was fun to play when I visited somebody else's house. Board games were similarly outside of my budget. Every once in a while, I was able to get one, and then I would squeeze every drop of entertainment from it, regardless of how it first struck me. And so that was probably the beginning of my habit of trying to learn what makes these games fun. Table games are always going to have a special place because it has sitting around with other people, which is wonderful. Computer games, I love them as well. They have different strengths.
Yeah, tell me some favorites, actually. I'm very curious to know what your favorite computer games that you played, let's say 80s and 90s.
80s probably would have been like Empire, and late in the 80s, I don't know, was Civ back in the 80s?
Civ came out, I believe, I remember playing Civ 1 in 1992. It was, in fact, a game that I was addicted to when I first started school.
So Empire was like was the precursor to Civ, and but I liked that a lot. I loved in the 80s. I liked games where you programmed things. So I programmed like C robots, and there were a bunch of games like that. I really do still enjoy games where you're programming something. In the 90s, I liked strategy games. Like Fantasy General is one that I just actually played last week. I thought I wondered if I had access to it, and I found it and played it and enjoyed it, and it held up.
Fantasy General.
Yeah, SS. 90s? Yeah, I think that was like 97, 98.
Oh, okay, so late 90s.
Late 90s, and it was from I think SSI. They did a series of war games, and so they did like Panzer General and Pacific General, but Fantasy General was the one that I really liked. I did play the others as well. I liked Heroes of Might and Magic. 2 and 3.
That's a familiar one for sure.
Yeah, were amazing.
Beyond amazing.
Yeah,
yeah. It's hard to even imagine some of the quality of some of the games that were made in the 1990s. I have an ongoing series on the channel where I talk about games that were both formative to me in the 80s and then games that I went all in on, mostly in the 1990s. I think, probably much more into fighting games than you. I played a ton of Street Fighter, and you don't strike me as a Street Fighter-y guy, although maybe, maybe I'm wrong.
I played in the arcade some, but never really got into it. But I love I liked being part of conversations about strategy and tactics and things like that. The sort of the structure of Street Fighter is very interesting.
It is
to me.
It's fascinating, actually. Yeah, it's one of those things that, like so many really truly great games, there's a minimum level of skill that's required to even ascertain what the skill is. And most people in Street Fighter never even get close to that. Magic is so much like this too. And obviously a lot of great games are, where there's just this minimum understanding to even really begin to perceive what the skill in the game is. I was wondering, actually, you as a designer and sort of tinkerer and a programmer, did you ever dissect the games that you played and modify them at all? Were you ever tempted to do that? Because I know that depending on your level of programming skill, I had a friend of mine who was a computer engineer in high school. And did you ever play the game Warlords?
Yes, that was kind of similar to Heroes of Might and Magic, wasn't it?
It was. Heroes of Might and Magic is definitely inspired by it, I think, because in Warlords, you basically do the same thing. You've got a hero that gathers an army together and you go and attack castles. In fact, it seems like the direct inspiration. And the difference is that it came with no modding tools at all. You basically just played one map. It was like Dota. You just had the one map. And so you would learn the map and you're like, man, I really wish that, there was a choke point here or that there was a passageway here because this team is trapped there. Well, my friend took the game apart and we modified the terrain. and we switched the castles around and stuff. And I remember just having my mind just exploded by this experience. Wait, you can modify a computer game? Is that possible? Did you ever do that, or were you tempted to do it?
Oh, I would have if I had had the resources, the skills, I should say. Resources is kind of a cop out. Um, I'm a dedicated game tinkerer for board games, of course.
Of course.
When given modding tools, then I love to explore the mods which other people had made. And similarly with board games and card games, I was constantly tinkering with them, adding rules, changing rules. It's a wonderful way to learn game design. As a hobbyist, I couldn't recommend it more. So I've talked to people about that, and sometimes gotten some pushback. Well, you're a game designer, you're allowed to make these changes. And I say, well, no, you should do it yourself. You should come up with whatever wacky rules you want and play, and I guarantee you it's going to be fun for one playthrough at least. You're not going to get, with your random rules changes, you're not going to get right out of the gate something which is going to stand up to what great games do, which is a lifetime of play. But you will be entertained for once, twice an evening, and it's just a wonderful way to engage with games. I've got actually a book, encyclopedia of chess variations, and it's got, I think, 3,000 different chess variations. I've read it from cover to cover twice, highlighting the games I was interested in. There's no game that I like that I don't want to tinker with.
I'm wondering actually if you can recall any popular titles that you might have tinkered with yourself, where you played them. For example, a lot of people create house rules for Monopoly. That's a game that everybody knows. And there are people that go and start adjusting the rules for Monopoly in order to get rid of some of the things that feel a little bit archaic in the design. Of course, Jay Schneider has his students as basically the final project go and design a completely new version of Monopoly. I actually went to one of those judgings, and it was crazy what people came up with to try to modify it. Did you do the same kind of modifications to any of the really popular games?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But
I'd like to hear what those are. Yeah, if you can recall any. Can you remember?
Yeah, I can probably I can certainly remember some. I would say, though, I was usually not trying to fix something which I saw as wrong with the games. I was usually just trying to make them more interesting in one way or another, or see what would happen. Right at the beginning with Cosmic Encounter, you have this basic set of rules, and then each person has an alien power to break, that can break the rules. And although this was not original to me, I certainly would play with multiple powers, and this is something which, of course, this brings us back to the are you networked, right?
Right.
I wasn't networked, so this was original to me in that I thought, oh, this is pretty cool, but it wasn't in the rules and so forth. But it's commonplace; people do that, and would play with 5 powers, have each one attached to a particular planet, so it would give you strategy of which planets to attack.
That's so much more interesting than just one. Yeah, I agree. That's so cool. You can pick up different ones.
Yeah, and there were some games where they weren't really doing it for me as far as the economics were concerned. You can say, like, it wasn't Monopoly, but you could have said a Monopoly-like game. And so one thing we would do a lot with those sort of games is just add poker to it. So whenever a particular event would happen, you had some sort of resource, and you would play a hand of poker. And so then you could be good at the original game, or you could be good at poker, and you could be lucky at the original game. You could be lucky at poker. Either way, you had all these different dimensions now open to you, and it was often a fun way to play. Dealer's choice was the way we used to play, and the dealer would name the game. And this was a great opportunity to introduce these weird variations, and some of them worked and some of them didn't. There were ones where, like a stud games, and you could fold, and when anybody got a spade face up, people who folded were back in. So you could strategically say, "I'm going to fold, even though I've got a kind of a good hand, but hope to get back into the game." And then some of them worked well, some of them didn't. One of the ones that didn't work well was one where you wanted the second best hand, and it was a lot of fun, but yeah, it was just completely broken, because then the people with good hands would fold, and then the people with second best hands would not have the second best hands anymore.
Right, exactly.
And so, anyway, it was I love to tinker.
Clearly, yeah. I'm just thinking about this weird incepted version of Cosmic Encounters involving poker with variants on the type of poker that you're playing on top of that also, and poker chips also. And
sometimes these games would come naturally from, like, I remember at one point we were playing Hearts, or some variation of Hearts, and we didn't have
in Cosmic Encounters. Or just
no, this was separate. This is okay. In grad school, I played a lot of Hearts.
I believe you.
And we didn't have any cards and any paper to keep score with, and so but I had a pen, so I started keeping track of the scores on cards. And so each of us had a card in the deck which we were keeping our score on. And then it was very natural there to make it so that now when you get those cards, you get whatever some percentage of their score as a penalty. So we'd be playing along and, you got the 10 of clubs. That's Brian's card. Oh, he's got 60 points. So I get 6 points, which is, and so then we called that feedback hearts, because the bigger your cards got, the more it would feed back and make the penalty even bigger.
I love the variant. I played a ton of Hearts also. At some point, someone taught me the rules to Omnibus Hearts. I don't know if you ever played that. I couldn't recall what they are, but
I remember the name. I don't remember the variation.
Yeah, your variant sounds very interesting. The fact that once someone gets a ton of points, right, and they're more precarious and likely to lose, they become very dangerous also.
Yeah, I played so many different variations. One of them actually became played for, I want to say, I imagine it's still played at Wizards, but it was played for at least 15 years. That was called Turbo Hearts.
Turbo Hearts, I've heard that too.
Yeah, we had a pretty serious league going in Turbo Hearts, which would restart it every few months, and it involved some rules from Chinese Hearts, and then some rules that I just made up, and it worked. It worked really well.
When you say we, I feel like it's a pretty good segue actually to talking about the we involved in kind of the landmark legendary thing that you created. I've heard, and I would need you to confirm or deny this, that the bedrock of what ultimately became Magic came from a project that you created called the 5 Colors of Magic. And I'm wondering if that's true. When did you start working on that? How did that idea begin?
5 Colors of Magic was something I was tinkering with, and some other my friends were tinkering with card games, magical themed card games back in the early 80s. I never read it, but there was a book called The 5 Colors of Magic or something like that, and so that's probably where I started tinkering with the number 5 and sort of making this correlation between energy and cards, and that's how you pay for your cards. And in fact, I remember back in the day making land cards, and so that was the early 80s.
You were very young then.
Yeah, college. I went to University of Pennsylvania, 81. The game back in the day had some of the hallmarks of what became Magic, but the Magic spark was missing, which was this idea that each person had their own cards and made their own deck.
It's something that's so just commonplace in a way, so ordinary and established in the TCG space. But it's crazy to think that, yeah, the idea of collecting something that was game related, that was incomplete, is such a revolutionary thing. How did that idea come to be? Did you have a eureka moment with it, or was it something that just gradually made sense as you started developing Magic?
Totally eureka, and one of my few eurekas. I hit me all at once. It was like this idea that the players didn't have to have the same equipment. You didn't have to have a game be a box you open up and everything's in there. And so There's lots of different ways to view the original concept of Magic, but one of them is as a game, which is much bigger than the box it comes in, because you only get this piece. You're dealt a hand in an amazingly large game. Was one of the ways that I originally thought about it.
Interesting. This is before or after your famous meeting with Peter Atkinson?
This was after.
This was after. So what I've been told, according to legend, and you could certainly tell the story better than me, but I think this is, I'll just repeat what is in the sort of vernacular of what the community thinks, is that you and Peter Atkinson met in line at Gen Con, waiting to get into, or Gamescom, waiting to get into a talk or something, some event. And he mentioned that he was a publisher living in a relatively small game publisher living in Seattle. And you said, hey, I'm a game designer. And you guys discussed the idea of a game that you might be able to plunk down and play for 10, 15, 20 minutes while you were waiting in line. And that sparked this idea in your head and made you think of 5 Colors of Magic. How accurate is that story?
In spirit, it's not too far off. But we did not meet in a convention.
You did not?
No. We met because a friend of mine, Mike Davis, was trying to get my game Robo Rally published. And Mike Davis, I offered Mike half of the ownership of Robo Rally if he would get it published, which he thought was a very generous offer. But then 7 years later, after talking to all these different publishers, he realized that it was not a very generous offer. It was a fair offer.
I see.
And he had actually gotten it accepted by some publishers, but it would fall through after a while. Like one of them was FASA, and it fell through because they wanted to change it too much. He had this idea that a new publisher, one that was just getting started, wouldn't have so many preconceptions about what they should do with the game. Should they license it? Should they tie it into some existing game universe? Should they do something to it? And so that's what got me in touch with Peter Atkinson. And so the first time I met him, we were actually talking about Robo Rally, and he liked the game, but did not see himself in a position to publish it because it was too expensive. And he asked for a game that was cheaper and could be played fast. He wanted something which could be played in line at.
That's where that part of
so
the
that's
story
where that
comes
from. That is absolutely true. He wanted something fast that could be played in line and cheaper. And it was, my memory of it was that it was within the week I had this aha moment about Magic and ended up with something which was not cheaper. It was quite expensive, but it was so exciting that he went with it anyway.
It's such a legendary story on so many different levels. I've heard different parts of it, read and spoken to me anecdotally over the years. So having you confirm that piece of history is really interesting. Thank you a lot for that. I mean, I guess it would make sense that those things would blend together over time.
Yeah. As I said, it has the broad strokes correct. We met. He was interested in a game that could be played in line, fast at conventions. He was a new game publisher.
So how much time passed between when you guys had that conversation, when you went back to, you went to the shelf and pulled out the dusty box and blew the dust off of him and went, oh, 5 Colors of Magic. I remember this. And you set to work on it. How long did it take between basically revisiting the game, having the aha collectability moment, and getting a version of the game that felt playable enough to show to Peter?
I'm not sure about the timeline, but I think within a week of talking to him, I had this aha. I told him about the aha. He was super excited about it. But one thing that's I think really illustrates the times is that where my head was that I told him not to get too excited because I didn't even know if it was possible to design a game like I was thinking. And today that seems so obvious you can because there's so many examples.
Thousands.
But at the time I was saying like, look, if you could choose which cards you play in poker, it's not going to be a better game. If you could choose what cards you play in bridge, it's not a better game. And so there was this hurdle of like, how do I make it so that you can choose what cards you're going to bring to the game and still have it be fun? And these frameworks I had weren't working. And so I think it was a couple months before I pulled out the old Magic game and said, "Oh, this," realized that this was a great framework for it. And I know that there were some steps along the way where I know that I was tinkering with some other things, like there was a dungeon exploration game, and there was one where you were lock picking.
I'm glad you didn't make that game.
Yeah. And so then got Magic, and it sort of fell together very quickly after that. In part because a lot of the framework that had been there was useful for me.
Yeah. Were you the chief kind of flavorful force behind it? You had a huge background playing Dungeons and Dragons, and I imagine you've read more than your fair share of Tolkien. And those two influences are so apparent in Alpha. Were there other people that contributed creatively and lore-wise to Alpha to ground it in some other things that you might not have considered?
So all the flavor came from me, but there were three other parts to it, probably more than I'm forgetting. There's the art, and the art was often brilliant, and Jesper Meerfors was the art director, and we shared a philosophy of giving the artist very little instruction because we wanted them to be creative.
Interesting. Yeah, I was very curious. Very curious. Thanks for that anecdote. I just to speak personally, we talked about this quite some time ago, actually. But I've been running or leading a game development company here in Seattle for close to 2 years, and I am deeply involved in the artistic process, even though my contributions, are all over the place. But I'm always involved in the art. And I was very curious to know if you had consulted directly with Jesper about how things were meant to look, or you just confirmed that basically it was much more of, here's a thematic idea for a card. We're just going to see what they come up with.
Yeah, it was very much in that category. We would give guidance where asked, and he was in charge of that process. And we basically we chatted, saw eye to eye, and he ran with it. And I would look at the art and mostly just say, "Oh, that's great, that's great, that's great." And
did you have any that you're like, "No, this is horrendous"?
I never put my, we actually probably for the most part had to use what we had anyway because we were constrained by our budget. So what would happen is that we would get a piece of art and it wouldn't work for the card, and we would create a new card to support it.
Got it.
Birds of Paradise. The second category was the flavor text. And
yes.
I did a good chunk of the flavor text, but it was something that was introduced pretty late in the process, and so other people did too. So I'd say I probably did about a quarter of the flavor text and was more approving. I was in a position of approving the other flavor text. So there was a lot there that people introduced independent of me. And then the last thing was there were some contributions made by Chris Page, who was one of my playtesters, and he made I don't know, maybe 20 card suggestions, and he really kicked up some of the flavor and playfulness of it, which really kickstarted some things. So I remember in particular, like the Goblin Bombardiers. I think that was one of his designs, and I think that is like it was something he did some things which really affected the playfulness of the original design.
Is that the Balloon Brigade you're talking about?
Yeah, that's it. And I think it was something where you had to pay red to get them to fly, and so
exactly.
And it was so much fun. This idea of they can fly, but they can't fly really well, so it's not very reliable. And so yeah.
Setting the stage for sort of the Goblin ethos for the rest of time, right?
Yeah.
That they're tinkerers, but rather incompetent in most of the things that they do. Every now and then they might target the right thing, but you're definitely taking damage in the process or something.
Yeah.
Man, I'm curious to know, actually, you mentioned just a few minutes ago that you had written flavor text on things. And I'm curious if you could recall a couple of pieces of flavor text that you're really proud of.
I wrote a little poem for the troll. Oi, oi, oi.
Oi, oi,
Gotta,
oi.
yeah, that one. And no, I don't think I was really proud of any most of the flavor. Probably when we start getting into Arabian Nights, there would be flavor text, which I really was beginning to relate with more. But the flavor text for Alpha was more. It was more last minute, and I think we were still finding our feet. It was later that I really began to like flavor text. I realized that what I really liked in flavor text was the humorous flavor text. For instance, I wrote the flavor text on the crawworm, and I don't particularly care for the flavor text on crawworm. It's
I
not
don't remember
humorous.
it, actually.
It's
Yeah.
not. It's just sort of holding space. And there was a bunch that were in that category. One that I remember from the original set that I really liked that I didn't write was there was one, an imp or something, which had this enormously long name. So I don't know who did that, but I really liked it was just a quote, and then the name of the imp was just
The quote was some super long name. Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought that was fun.
Yeah. I think Nettling Imp has too much text on it, too much words text, in terms of what it does mechanically to fit in any flavor text. Do you recall your entire oi, oi, oi poem?
Gotta hurt in here. Something.
Oi, oi,
gonna
oi.
bosh, gonna nosh, and the hurt will disappear. Something like that.
Yeah, I think the second line is oi, 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 me smell a ting is near.
Yeah,
gonna bosh
that's
and gonna nosh, and then the hurt will disappear. A great poem. And honestly, the inspiration, there is an entire tournament called the Uthden Troll Cup that I have watched as an old school event on YouTube many, many times over several years, where everybody's got Uthden Troll on their playmat and oi, oi, oi is written everywhere.
Well,
so very memeable. Well done on that.
Thank you.
I wanted to talk about another thing that was kind of probably a consequence of the era, the general feeling and sentiments of the development team, and something that made its way into the game when I was introduced to it. I started playing Magic in January of 1994. I was introduced at a friend's birthday party. And when my friend and I, my close friend that I was gaming with at UC Santa Cruz, took out the manual and tried to really learn the game in earnest, we discovered that you were meant to play the game for ante. That the game had this whole wagering component to it that was built into the game, not just in terms of how there were rare cards that specifically dealt with ante, 3 cards in particular. And one of them was like totally ridiculous. 1 black mana draws 7.
That's right. But you ante another card or something.
But on top of that, it seemed to be, and based on everything that you and I have talked about over the years, and certainly I've discussed the subject with other people, but your belief was that it was extremely important that a Magic community, a small, closed ecosystem of Magic players, needed a way to have card churn in order to keep things interesting, in order to keep power from being consolidated in the hands of one person. That every time you sat down to play a game of Magic, you actually had to wager one of the cards randomly from your deck. So how did Ante make it kind of through the testing gauntlet? Was it something that you guys explored a lot? Was it something you always had and just sort of assumed that you needed it?
I think Ante was there from the very early playtesting. And probably as soon as I gave people their own playtest decks, Ante was a part of the game. And Ante obviously did not survive long. It was already being phased out probably in 94.
Yeah, it was.
And the reason for it was, as you said, I wanted to see card churn. I did not expect people to buy as many Magic cards as they ended up buying. And there was, in fact, there was, in fact, a particular point where we had, I don't know, something like Black Lotus. A lot of people will point to those early cards and talk about how unbalanced they were, but I'm really happy with the original balance. One of the things was that if you've got 60 cards and one of them's a Black Lotus, and I've got 60 cards and one of them's a Shivan Dragon, you might bet on me instead of you. That Black Lotus is not going to make or break the game. Now, we knew, of course, that if you had access to 20 Black Lotuses, basically you could win on the first turn. You would need less than that. We calculated, I said, okay, well, if everybody buys 4 decks, which will be a rich environment, and there's 20 people in your play group, and they circulate and you trade, then there's going to be 1 Black Lotus in that group. That can't be a problem. And so there was a point where we said, well, if this ends up being a problem, then it's the sort of problem which is good to have, because that means the game is gangbusters successful.
Right.
And so we'll
figure it out later.
Exactly. And so we went with that. The idea of ante is intimately tied to this idea that people are only going to buy 4 or 5 decks in a rich play group. I sort of saw the game being driven by trading, but I also know that a lot of the people who play games don't like that sort of interaction with people. And so I wanted to have some way that the cards could circulate without making somebody trade. A lot of people love to trade. In our playtest groups, but some of them didn't like doing that. And so that was one of the reasons ante was there. And it was supposed to be some sort of balancer, in that if you played with a very effective deck, and you were winning 90% of your games, well, 10% of the time you were losing one of your effective cards.
Right. Assuming it wasn't a land.
That was the idea. And what we hadn't anticipated was that once collectability became a part of the game, we're actually asking people to stake something they care about. I mean, people already cared about the cards even when they were just pieces of Xeroxed paper.
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
But when they're actually, you can actually go to the store and actually sell them for money, then you're talking about something different. You're actually asking people to gamble and risk something which is also worth, in some ways, more than money to you, in that you could sell it for whatever, $20, but you wouldn't because you like it too much. So this is too much of an ask, and so that's why ante went away. And it wasn't necessary because people were buying so many cards. There was so much trading going on.
Beyond, yeah, you literally couldn't buy cards for months and months and months. When I started playing in January, again, of 1994, when a box or two appeared somewhere, instantaneously, somehow people found out about it and descended on it and bought everything within a couple of hours. Usually people were that ravenous for this product. You've definitely hit a home run when that's going on. What was interesting is that we also rejected ante pretty early. One of the things that I thought was really interesting, and something that in an event that I essentially helped run and co-host down in Vegas at the end of April, I'd love to tell you about it another time. But we ran with an ante mechanic, and one of the things that I used in that tournament was that basic lands were ignored. So if you anteed a basic land, you just kept flipping until you hit a non-basic land. And it's interesting that you allowed for the variance of anteing basic lands in a game. That wasn't something that was codified. Yeah,
I think your variation is very sensible, and maybe something we would have lived with if we had kept ante. I mean, that seems reasonable. I know that even though I think getting rid of ante was the right decision, I did miss a lot of the cards and situations which would come up. I know that originally we played a lot of leagues, and so in a league you would be given a deck, maybe a couple boosters, and then you couldn't trade. So you had to keep this distinct from everything else. And this made a really wonderful, limited card environment, something which I would recommend people try today because Definitely. It's a lot of fun. But in these leagues, ante worked also quite well. And I remember driving the other people in R&D crazy because I had an ante card which allowed me to raise the stakes. The other person could concede, or we both ante again. And they were so just...
Was that Demonic Attorney? Or is that
might have been a Demonic Attorney.
I don't recall, but that sounds familiar.
They were pulling their hair out because I was raking in so many cards on people because they could see that I was in a position where I could win anytime I wanted, but I was waiting to get this card, and then I would play the card, and the other person would accept the ante, and then I would win immediately.
You'd win immediately. It's totally diabolical. Yeah, I struggle to recall what Demonic Attorney and Dark Pact do. Maybe it's one of those. But as you know, the cards were banned for most of the time. Yeah. One of the things that we did actually, our compromise, because we actually believed in kind of the integrity of your vision. The other component to this too, and I don't know if this is something that came up in your playtest group, but the big brains in the room always would get their ego involved in the outcome of a game of Magic. Your deck was really kind of an expression of who you were after a while. And psychographics are a big part of what attracts people to Magic and certainly determines how they go about solving the problem of winning a game of Magic, and also what they derive in satisfaction from that process. And a lot of the time, particularly back in the day when everybody lived in a little siloed bubble, really before the modern internet, everybody had their own ideas about what was important in a game of Magic and their own superstitions and their own house rules and all sorts of weird things. And you would constantly be debating with people about what was true. And the way that you normally would settle this, you didn't pull your sidearm out and shoot the guy in the street. Instead, you challenged them to play for ante. It's like, hey, man, if you think you know how to play a game of Magic, show me, prove it. Open up your binder and we'll pick valuable cards and measure them up against each other. And essentially getting the person to put their money where their mouth is. If you're so confident that your whatever land destruction strategy wins and it's unbeatable, let's play for a Mox. How about that? And there were a lot of people that did that. And so I think, at least in my experience, that was really the value of ante, because attaching stakes to the outcome of the game makes people so much more accountable, just like it does in a game like poker. Yeah.
Thinking about what playing for chips in poker did for poker was certainly part of, it was like adding that little edge to the game was something I was after. One of the amazing things in the history of Magic was the first Pro Tour. Before the first Pro Tour, the people at Wizards were the best players in the world. And there was like just no doubt about that. There were some good players out there, but it was like the people at Wizards knew way more. And I could go into any game store and beat most of the people who would come to me with a deck of all common cards, and which is something I would do to demonstrate that common cards are not garbage. But once the Pro Tour was in place, it was very fast where that thing about putting your money where your mouth is. You're going to go to the Pro Tour. You have to. You think you've got the right philosophy, then you got a place in the Pro Tour, and you got to prove it. And that really legitimized serious play and rewarded it, and brought it to the next level.
Yeah, we'll definitely. I definitely want to talk more about sort of the competitive parts of the game. One of the things I hinted at this before, but I had a set of rumors that I kind of wanted to run through in the early game's development before we move on, and to see whether these particular things are true, if you can recall them. The first rumor that I am curious to explore is the original wording on the card Time Walk. Legend has it that in Gamma or whatever, or some early playtest version of Time Walk, the card said target player loses next turn. And that R&D realized that people might interpret that the card says 2 mana, kill your opponent. Is that actually true?
Again, close. There was a card. I want to say there was some star in the title, so it was definitely Time Walk, and it said target player loses next turn, and it was actually, I think the truth is actually more amusing because what happened was I printed that in this playtest version of Magic, and I have had a Russian player who was playing, and he said, "Richard, I have the most powerful card," and he said, "I play it, they lose next turn." And I say, "Oh, really? What is it?" And he showed it to me, and it said, "Oh, yeah, he does lose next turn." So.
The fact he was Russian may have actually affected the interpretation somewhat.
Yeah, no, it probably did, because a native speaker probably would have interpreted that. I mean, even though it's obviously open to that interpretation, when you're not a native speaker, you're going to be much more prone to interpreting things in a different way.
For sure.
So this didn't make it as long as R&D. I actually was able to edit that out myself.
Okay, so it never made it to the point where everybody was playing this card in your playtest sessions.
No.
Time Walk running amok. Yeah, it's funny actually how target player loses next turn and you take an extra turn are essentially interchangeable. but yet their impact on a game of Magic changes based on the number of players dramatically. If you think about how much more powerful a Time Walk effect is, particularly for 2 mana in a 4-player game of Commander.
Sure.
Because it's target player loses next turn, target player loses next turn, target player loses. It's 3 times as powerful when you interpret it that way, which I've always found very interesting. Okay, so the next rumor relates to something you kind of touched on a little bit before. It's the boon cycle. The 5 cards in Magic that all cost 1 mana of a particular color: Dark Ritual, Giant Growth, Lightning Bolt, Healing Salve, and Ancestral Recall, which is the most powerful card in the set measured against one of the weakest cards in the set in Healing Salve. And the rumor is that R&D didn't understand how good Ancestral Recall was and thought that it was essentially equal in power level to Giant Growth and Lightning Bolt and Healing Salve. How well understood was card advantage during your playtest sessions?
It was very, very well understood. Back when things were being balanced with the understanding that people wouldn't have more than 4 or 5 decks. And my memory could be wrong here, but I think that's actually, you can actually see our understanding of that there, in that I think that's the only one which isn't common.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so it was all common going in till late. And then there was this idea, then there was this thing, well, this card really, we have decks, even in playtest, which are first turn kills when you can make whatever you like. We don't have to worry about people getting too many cards, but if we make it a rare, we don't have to think about it. And so that's what we did.
Yeah.
It was understood that they were of different powers, and card advantage was understood. It was not like that wasn't something that I came up with. People began talking about it among my playtesters, and then I learned that was a really good way to think about cards.
One of the things that I read a lot when people, particularly newer players, look at the old cards, they are always talking about mistakes. R&D made so many mistakes. I can't believe that they printed these cards. They're so broken. How ridiculous. That implies that the designers of the game did not understand how broken cards like Black Lotus and Ancestral Recall really were. And you sort of half debunked it already, but I would definitely like a kind of a more official statement from you and the playtest team about recognizing just how insane those tools really were and deciding to print them anyway.
Yeah, we had going in first turn kill decks. So we knew, and it took us a while to come up with them. The game was play tested for over 2 years. There's 2 things going on which make me very happy with the original balancing. One is it was done with this understanding, as I said, that the people aren't going to get that many cards, and so by controlling by rarity, what we're really doing is making a lot of these cards which are really powerful in combination not that available. And so that was part of the design philosophy, which that turned out to be incorrect, and we had to correct that. That people were going to get more cards than we expected. The other thing, though, and this is the more important part about the balance, is that for years, I would say until the Pro Tour, the casual player didn't understand how to make these decks, and so this is illustrated by the fact that I could beat all these people with common cards because I would come in and play with my bears and giant growths, and I would clean them up, and they would turn 1 play bam 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 with some moxes and some lotuses, and they would put something big into play, and I'd nuke it, and then they had no cards in their hand.
Right.
And also, Ancestral Recall is great because it's got huge card advantage, but if your cards suck, it doesn't matter, right? I mean, it's like
very true.
The question is, if these cards were properly balanced by today's standards, and so now, like, I literally saw lotuses being traded for lands because a land is permanent and a lotus is temporary.
You actually witnessed that?
I saw that. I saw very early on in the first, also in one of the very first tournaments. So this would probably be
93.
Probably 93 in the winter, something like that. It was what we called, in fact, a Rochester draft because it was in Rochester. And
no kidding. Really?
Yeah, and that was what was probably called today a snake draft. And so
I just hosted a Rochester draft. We called it Rochester draft.
Oh, really?
But I didn't know the origin. Yeah.
um, so so we had R&D out there helping with this, and we'd lay out the cards, and a Black Lotus got flipped up, and it went
alpha, I imagine.
I don't remember,
or
but
maybe beta.
I wasn't there. This was a story that R&D told me.
Okay.
But the Lotus didn't get picked up until it had turned the bend and was on its way back.
No kidding.
And so afterwards, one of the people in R&D was talking to one of the people who was helping out, who seemed pretty sensible, and said, "Yeah, I can't believe they're drafting. They should just be drafting randomly." And the guy who was helping them said, "Yeah, for sure, the drafting is terrible." And I said, "Yeah, a Black Lotus. Can you believe how long it took them to draft that?" And he said, "Yeah, I love Black Lotus." He said, "Turn one. Wall of wood, wall of wood, wall of wood. Bam!
Triple wall of wood. Bam.
Yeah. Oh my gosh! It's like you basically won at that point.
That's amazing.
So the question, to bring it back, the question of would the game have been better if this were a Lotus Petal, where you play it and you get a mana of any color, which I don't know whether that's powerful or weak these days. But
depends on the format a lot. It's a very commonly played card in older formats. It's very good.
So
even at a third of a Lotus.
So I contend, for anybody who looks back at the old sets and say this was unbalanced, would players' experiences have been better if this card they already would trade for land and would let go around the bend? If we made it even weaker, would that have made people have more fun?
Yeah,
and I contend the answer is no. They didn't know what to do with the Ancestral Recall, so let them have their fun with it. We don't have to charge them 5 mana to draw 2 cards or something. We can charge, have them pay 1 and draw 3. It's not broken until people start breaking it.
Totally. That is one of the things that I find so amazing about Magic in general. It relates to the question that you just sort of posed. How good is Lotus Petal? I don't really know how good it is. Well, it really, really depends on the era, the format, the deck, the strategy, etc. And the fact that every single card, depending on the era that it's played in and the tools that are available around it, affects its power level anywhere from dumpster level to S tier.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely true.
And another thing I really love, particularly about Eternal formats, is that a card might get printed. The best example of this, by far, in my opinion, is the card Lion's Eye Diamond. A card that was printed. Do you remember what it did?
I remember the name. I do not remember what it did.
It was like a troll to the community. It was a rare in Mirage, and it was functionally the same as Black Lotus, but for 1 extra line. Discard your hand. In a game where you would have to announce and pay mana costs before you play anything. How you can't even use it to cast anything. Like, what is this card, right? You get all the advantage of a Black Lotus, 0 mana, make 3, but you can't actually cast anything with it. Total troll card, dumpster rare for generations. Go look online and see how expensive Lion's Eye Diamond is now. It's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars. It's by far the most valuable card in Mirage. And it's because of, it's not even necessarily power creep. It's just advancement and evolution of the game and more tools becoming available. And now Lion's Eye Diamond is the cornerstone of a degenerate graveyard-based kill using a card called Underworld Breach that was printed like 30 years later or something.
Well, that's marvelous. I did not know that. That's that's one of the things that I tried to do from the start was make cards which didn't have a purpose. And so I did not make Lion's Eye Diamond, and I don't know whether I would have approved of it or not back then. But the idea that you make a card which nobody can use, I have no problem with that because it gives them something to work with.
It does,
and it makes it feel much more like an accomplishment when you discover it. Like I had at one point, Mike Long came to me and complained that he had found this broken combination, and he complained that R&D had just stuck it there, and it was so obvious that these cards meant together. And as far as I know, that wasn't the case. I don't like designing where there's part A, part B, and part C, and you guys just push the 3 buttons. I like putting it out where there's just all this stuff, and you got to figure out how it fits together.
Yeah, that is a term that I use a lot in discussions with my current dev team. The term is emergent gameplay. Something that, for example, the genius creator of the game Balatro, which I'm sure that you've played more than your fair share of, I hope.
I have. I love it. Yeah.
A beautiful embodiment of the elegance of emergent gameplay. Let's give you all of these really interesting kind of disparate tools. And all of this kind of cool stuff just froths up as you play the game. A lot of it not even predicted by the developer himself, because he doesn't have the capacity to go and leverage the brain of millions of people playing the game.
I think it's a joy as the creator to create things which go beyond your anticipation, and it makes it more fun as the player. As a player, you never, it's like you on the one hand, sometimes you don't really know whether you're making discoveries, but sometimes, I don't know, it feels more genuine sometimes than others. One of the flaws I see in games these days often is what I call overbalancing. This has happened to me many times where I sit down and play a game where the playtesters love it, and I sit down and it's like, doesn't do anything for me. And it's because everything feels so even, like I can do this or this or this, and they all kind of feel even. I don't feel like I've got any edge. Now, if I played it, I would begin to get to the point where I could understand the nuances of what's going on, and there might be a really good game there, but it's been developed by people who became experts at it. And so this overdeveloped status is something where the player coming in doesn't feel like they have anything to hold on to. And one of the signs of this is you can sometimes get these situations where you talk to the designer, and they'll talk to not the designer, some of the playtesters. The playtesters, their eyes will go glassy and goes, "Oh, I remember that card. That card used to be so broken. I made this deck which just crushed with it." And it's like, it's like you feel like all the fun has been developed out of the game. So that is the risk of overdevelopment.
All right. So somehow an entire hour has already flown by. I could talk to Richard for days, and there's a lot more conversation coming up. Stay tuned for that. I'm just going to take a quick break. I would love your feedback on this series. If you're enjoying the videos, please give me a thumbs up. If there's games you think I might have missed, let me know and I will get to them. See you for the next one.